I'm standing on the shoreline of Lake Kookanusa, just north of the town of Libby, Montana. Lake Kookanusa was formed by the Libby Dam. It's partly in the U.S., part in Canada, which is why the name is what it is. And for the final day of this trek, heading home today, it's day 44, day 45. And I've returned to this campsite. I dipped back down into the United States, into Washington State a couple of days ago to ride a stretch of one of my favorite rides, which is called Scenic Byway Highway 20, through a bit of northeastern Washington State and through the panhandle of Idaho and into Montana, and then up to this spot here. This is a campsite that I have stayed at a number of times before. I actually finished the trip that I did last year on the bike in this same campsite, and from this very dock I did a similar video wrapping up the trip, and that's what I'm doing now. I'm wrapping up my trip and, you know, talk a little bit about the highlights. It's been quite a trek. You know, they're over like I mentioned, 45 days, and it's interesting because the last 3 years have been the exact same amount of days, and it wasn't really planned that way. But when I did the Canada trip in 2023, and then last year Route 66, and then up into Colorado and Wyoming, and across through Oregon to the coast, and swinging back around through here, was also exactly 45 days. And all of them were within a few hundred kilometers of each other. By the time I get home today, I'm going to be somewhere around 9,700 kilometers. Over 300 hours on the bike itself and the actual ride. And yeah, it's been quite a trek. Quite a bit different this year, certainly more remote, more adventurous, you know, taking the trailer, a little more gear, a little more comfortable, I would say, from that point of view. Than in past years, plus doing these videos. I've done over 100 videos, over 200 posts. A little bit different too with people following these. I've had over 50 people had signed up, and I've had a lot of comments, and I appreciate that very much. I don't know if anyone's actually watched all 100 videos. I kind of doubt that. Hopefully you haven't found them too boring and somewhat entertaining and maybe a bit educational. But I appreciate you taking the time and making the comments. Yeah, so it's been quite the trek through smoke and wildfires and road construction, you know, crumbling roads above permafrost. That was quite interesting. Quite a lot of fascinating history following the trail of the Klondike gold rush, which was one of the main reasons that I did this trek. You know, making my way to the end of the asphalt in northwest Canada, up into the Yukon. That was quite fascinating. And then beyond that, through the top of the world highway, the most northern border crossing in North America, near Chicken, Alaska, and back onto the Alaskan highway. I think I made it up to about mile 1400 of the Alaskan highway, and it was interesting to learn that, you know, a good part of that highway, most of that highway actually, is in Canada, not in the US. But learning a bit about the history of them building that highway, the challenges on the permafrost, and even learning about permafrost itself. I had no idea of the techniques and things that they've come up with to build on the permafrost to the city of, the town of Dawson City. Most of those buildings, all of those buildings sitting on cribs of wooden cribs and piles, just flat on the ground, allowing them to be adjusted every couple of years to level them out. And these are 2- and 3-story hotels and buildings, and they're all built that way so they don't sink into the permafrost. You know, that was quite fascinating. You know, the graveyard of the riverboats on the Yukon River, that was very interesting too. You know, those riverboats slowly disintegrating and disappearing into the ground. visiting the childhood home and cabins of three of Canada's most famous authors, Pierre Berton, Robert Service, Jack London. I would say that was really something, catching up with a few of my older friends and doing some videos on their life story, which I hope you found that interesting. A lot of people that I meet, they'll ask, what was the highlight of the trip? What did you like the most? And I'd have to say that certainly the town of Dawson City was definitely worth the effort to get up there. It's remote, but very authentic. They've done an excellent job in preserving those buildings and telling the story of the Klondike. They really bring that history alive there in that town. That and the spectacular scenery up there, Yukon, the mountains, that stretch between Haines Junction and Haines, Alaska is just spectacular. It's one of the most incredible rides that I have ever done. I think every Canadian should try to get up there and see it, because it's quite amazing. Some of the other things, coming across a whole herd of wood buffalo stretch from one side of the Alaskan highway to the other, hundreds of them, and slowly making my way through them. Coming across a herd of wild horses, same sort of thing on another secondary highway. Bears, I think I counted 8 different bear encounters, mostly while I was riding. Fortunately, there was one that was near a campground I was in. A couple grizzlies, mostly black bears, moose, plenty of moose, deer, at least 12, 14 different encounters of deer on the road, close encounters, a few close encounters with cars, but I won't go into detail on that. Those are certainly the highlights. The being in Robert Service's cabin, the actual cabin where he wrote some of his most famous pieces, the cremation of Sam McGee, the shooting of Dan McGraw, he wrote right in that cabin, being able to go in there. His stuff is still all there as he left it. That, and yeah, then of course there was, what are the things that you didn't consider the highlights? And I'd say disappointing a little bit was the town of Skagway. Kind of mixed feelings about that. It's important to go there. I wanted to arrive by boat. I wanted to kind of have a similar experience of what the Klondikers felt when they arrived going down that Lynn Canal, that long inlet, and arriving into Skagway. Well, when we came around the corner and I saw those 5 huge cruise ships in the harbor, yeah, that wasn't exactly what I expected. Most of the buildings have been replaced now. I didn't find it very authentic, very touristy, I would say very Disney-esque, it felt like, and crowded. When I arrived in the middle of the day, of course, when all those cruise ship passengers were out on the streets, 10, 12,000 people, that was surprising. However, there were good things about Skagway. The White Pass and Yukon Railway, that's where it's based out of, and that's one of the most spectacular rail trips in the world. That was well worth the effort to get up over the White Pass. Following the trail of the Trail of 98, as they call it, and you could actually see part of that pathway was still there. And also being able to walk a little bit of the Chilkoot Pass Trail. That was quite interesting. So mixed feelings about Skagway. But other than that, it was all pretty positive. Even things like arriving in Port Hardy at 1 o'clock in the morning after a 16-hour ferry ride down from Prince Rupert in the pouring rain and setting up camp. That wasn't very nice. Yeah, the massive potholes on the Alaskan highway, anything north of where there's permafrost. That was quite a challenge. But you know, those are all the highlights of any trip. Those are the things that you're going to remember, and that's what I find is that when everything goes absolutely perfect, no one really has much to talk about. So, you know, it's those experiences that we like to remember and tell people about. And that's exactly the way that I like to travel. I feel that for me, it's one of the best ways to travel. Independent. I find them very flexible. I don't tend to have much of an itinerary. I can get into some of these more out-of-the-way places, spend a little bit more time kind of being in the space, meeting local people wherever I can, learning the history of the area, and that to me makes it all worthwhile. So I certainly hope that you've enjoyed tagging along with me. If you have, and maybe you learned a little bit about the area, and maybe you found it a bit inspiring, and possibly make you want to come and visit this area as well, and make your way up into the northern part of Canada. It's well worth the effort. So thanks again for joining me. I'm going to head home now. I'm going to be home later on this afternoon, and over the next few weeks I'll probably be running into a lot of you, and let me know what you think. So thanks a lot. Take care.